So good morning, everyone. I am Jessie Whittish with Kentucky Youth Advocates, and we are excited to be here with all of you this morning and also with our incredible panelists that you're going to hear from later around childcare updates and kind of looking ahead to 2022. So just a reminder that we are recording today's forum to share as both a video and a podcast. So we do ask that you stay muted. We know that you may have questions, particularly about this first part with the presentation. Please do drop those into the chat. Dr. Vanover has said she is willing to answer those in the chat when she can get to those. So definitely keep those coming in the chat, please. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Terry Brooks.
Hey, good morning, everybody. We should have invited folks to have a gold, G-O-L-D, gold theme today, because this is our 50th partner forum, like 50th anniversary, 50th forum. So, we have had U.S. senators and congressmen. We've had the governor and secretaries. We've had legislators and important folks like Sarah from the state. We've also had partners who give such voice to the real life, what's going on in a number of areas. So many of you have been here so very frequently and some of you are brand new. This is the first one. So whether you've been here for all 50 or this is your first one, we are really happy to have you. Childcare is very much on my mind because Representative Raymond actually gained a constituent last night, my 9th grandchild, meaning that Judy and I are taking care of grandkids 4, 5, 6, and 8. And so Sarah, if you could leave the call, because we're looking for immediate, accessible, high-quality childcare in 30 minutes. And if you could do that for me, then we'll be good to go, because I'm pretty tired this morning. But, as Jessie said, we wanted to do two things today to get a landscape of childcare as it sits in the Commonwealth right now. And then we wanted to look ahead both to lots of action that is occurring in DC and also anticipating what we see as a critical 2022 session for childcare. So we're going to do that in two parts. The first one is going to be more information-based. And then the back end, we have some key champions who we'll introduce more formally in a moment, key champions in Frankfurt, to talk to them about a look ahead. Because as you know, we at KYA and so many of you as partners, we're already architecting the 2022 budget proposal. We're already architecting the 2022 policies. Being very upfront, we already have our meeting set with leadership in House and Senate, as well as the governor's office. The pace that we believe is going to happen is that we've got to bake hard proposals in the immediate. I keep lifting up the idea that Senator Thomas and Senator Westerfield were on this forum the day after the session ended. It meant they had been out of session for 10 hours. And do you remember, Senator Westerfield already talked about the bills he had pre-filed for 2022. So the pace of Frankfurt has changed. And if we're waiting until September or October to start getting final versions, we've already lost. So that's why childcare is going to occupy, in early childhood in general, is going to occupy an outsized place in the 2022 blueprint. Now's the time we have to begin thinking. So with that, Patricia, I'm going to take a nap until our legislators join us. Sarah, if you could zoom off and get me that child care number as soon as possible, I'd appreciate it. So Patricia Tennant, take it away.
Thank you, Terry. And I think I can speak on behalf of everybody to say congratulations on that 9th grandbaby. Wonderful news. So I have the pleasure of being able to introduce Dr. Sarah Vanover, which many of you are familiar with her, but for those of you who aren't, she was hired in the position of the director of the Division of Childcare under the previous administration, and to the extreme happiness of all of us, she stayed in that position with the current administration. And Sarah has deep roots in early childhood. She began her career as a teacher and center director before going on to getting her PhD. And I think I can speak for many of us on the call that Sarah's level of openness to not only listening to parents, to providers, to employers is unparalleled. And then also turning around and being their advocate. We really greatly appreciate the transparency and just the smarts that you bring to it. Being able to combine that on the ground experience with the macro, big picture. We really think you are well positioned to lead us through this very kind of crazy time. I know Sarah and I were talking yesterday that often she wonders how she got into making these big decisions. But I think we all have great faith in you, Sarah, and are glad that you're taking on these big issues. So what I'd like to do today, I know we've had many discussions over the past year about childcare. And so what we felt it was an update for everyone was in order. We'd like to hear about, what has the impact of the pandemic been on childcare so far? And kind of run through there's been, multiple packages that have come down from the federal government first through the CARES Act and then through CRISA. And we know there's lots of help on the way with the American Rescue Plan and, more packages coming being discussed at the federal level. So what I've asked Sarah to do is just kind of give us an update on the childcare landscape currently in Kentucky, what help is currently available and what's on the way. And then, so I know, Sarah, you've kind of prepared some information to go through, and I invite you to just, the floor is yours. Take it from here.
Thank you very much. I'll start off by telling you all that I had a little technology panic session this morning because my computer decided to do a mandatory update. So if you want to go ahead and flip to the next slide there, Jessie. Jessie is helping me out because I had to switch computers and a lot of things. But I want to give you a big picture of the past year. I've worked in Kentucky childcare for 22 years, and the past year has been not only the craziest, but things have changed the most. We initially, we started off the pandemic with the emergency closure, something that had never been done. When everybody closed, we had no idea that there would be federal funding at that point, so we were just trying to figure out the best way to move forward. And then we started receiving these federal funding packages, and each one we thought, okay, this is the last one. When we got the CARES Act funds and we were given $67.74 million, I thought, oh my gosh, this is a one-time thing. This is amazing. I was so pumped when we sent the first payment out to providers. I was like, I just gave $35 million out to these childcare providers. This is going to help them so much. And really it was a drop in the bucket compared to what we all needed at this point. But as you look at that $67.74 million that we initially spent, this is the breakdown. The vast majority went to the providers. So if you look at the enrollment incentive capacity stipend that's listed at the $35 million, you go down to reopening stipend that is just over $6.5 million, and then you go to CARES $130 stipend that's just over $20 million. Those were all capacity-based stipends that went to child care programs, whether they were licensed centers, certified homes, or registered providers. And then a smaller portion of that went to the emergency centers that were open, the LDCs, either to help them stay open because they were all losing money every week, or their essential employees, the hero bonus, or to help with CCAP for those employees. And then there was a small amount of money left over that went towards parent copays. So this was wonderful. We thought it was fantastic. We finished spending it through the end of 2020, but before we finished the spending, the next package came. If you would switch, Jessie. So one thing that we also did with CARES Act money, this was not child care designated money, it came from the cabinet as a whole. But one of the things that we have really needed throughout Kentucky because of the child care deserts more than anything was additional family child care homes because they do so much better in rural areas than centers do. But the CARES Act funding allowed us to do some startup grants from this, and this was thanks to the cabinet. And so we gave away $2,500 startup stipends to focus on new family child care providers to help them with initial expenses like buying a business computer, baby gates and safety materials, insurance premiums, zoning fees, and needed materials. They got the money. They signed a contract saying that they would watch children for 12 months and that they would go through the certification process through the cabinet. 42 participants were approved for that money and have either already started or are finalizing their process to become new family child care homes. And so that's been a fabulous part of this funding as well. If you'll move on to the next. So then we found out at the end of December about the second round of federal funding, the Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act, or what we call CRISA. This time, we got a whole lot more money. We got $195.5 million just for child care. And in Kentucky, the top priority was established immediately as sustainment payments for our centers, and then also subsidy payments, how to support parents. So if you go to the next slide, you can see that sustainment payments for centers took 85% of what we were offered through CRISA. That was our top priority. That was $168 million, and that is 4 payments. 2 of those payments have now been issued. The first payment was $300 per child per program, and then the next 3 are $260. The first of the $260 payments, the April payment, was sent to Treasury last week, and centers are starting to receive those now. And then there'll be additional payments the last week of June and the last week of August. And everybody had to sign their contracts by March 10th for the sustainment stipends. So those are in progress right now. And again, they reached licensed, certified, and registered providers. If you want to move again. We also save money for background checks. So during the pandemic, fingerprint sites have been closed, and that we had to revert back to the old way of doing things with the paper name-based background checks, and so providers paid to do those. But when the fingerprint sites reopen, in order to meet the federal laws of the National Background Check Program, everybody will have to go and do their fingerprints. And so we don't want centers to have to pay for those twice. And so $3 million of the CRISA money is going to go to pay for that in the CARES system as those begin to reopen in the next couple of months. You can move forward. We also dedicated some money to training and technical assistance. Now, this training and technical assistance had to be focused on the pandemic. And so we were looking specifically at health and safety and mental health. So we're in the process of getting these trainings up and running. They will start in the next fiscal year after July 1. But we are going to be providing free CPR, first aid, EpiPen, and bloodborne pathogen training throughout the state to providers to make sure that we are on the top of our game with health and safety training. As well as we'll be partnering with the Department of Public Health and the Early Childhood Mental Health Specialists to offer trainings on resiliency and trauma-informed care. And this is going to look like 2 different things. There's going to be 2 options that they're going to be offering. One is going to be provider cafes that will focus on the trauma and the stress that the providers themselves have been through in the past year, which all of us know that it's not just the kids who have had a stressful year. And so these will also come with incentives for the providers, things they can use at the centers for calming corners, for stress relief, as they do a really tough job. And then they'll also be training on trauma-informed care with how to work with our kiddos who have been through a lot of stress themselves in the past year. You can move forward. And then the last portion of the CRISA money went to parent copays. So $20 million towards parent copays. That started February 1st. We anticipate that this will last approximately a year, maybe a little bit longer, depending on how many people are enrolled in the subsidy program at any time. We put the message out on this through lots of different fronts so that families and centers would be notified, and we can keep this going for a long time. It takes relief on the parents' part. Parents have the ability to kind of step back and not have to pay that copay, but also in a lot of centers, the center may waive the copay They may use it as a scholarship, different things like that. So this also ensures that the center gets the copay to make sure that they have all the operational funds possible during this time period. So the CRISA Act really, there were 5 projects that we used, $195 million for 5 projects, and we focused, like I said, top priority was supporting the centers, sustainment, second priority was subsidy. At the same time as we got these CRISA funds, we also looked at some additional funds, and one was how we use our annual block grant funding. Now, many of you may know already that the Division of Child Care is primarily funded through the Childcare and Development Block Grant, which is offered through the federal government. We have to put in a matching portion from the state, but the vast majority of funding comes from the federal government, and it is very specific on how it's to be used. The top priority is subsidy, but then it also has a quality component, and we divide that up into different programs. Typically in the past, for at least the immediate past, we have paid based on attendance. So if the child was attending the program on a regular basis, then CCAP was paid that way. But during the pandemic, we have switched to enrollment to make sure that if the center was limited by capacity, they haven't been able to serve every child that was previously enrolled, or if parents haven't been sending them regularly because of worry over illness and things like that, that the center would still receive that money. This started on February 1st for the January billing cycle. And what we're going to do is continue payment based on enrollment instead of attendance, a quarter at a time. We're going to continue to reevaluate at the end of each quarter and see if we still have the ability to do that. Since subsidy enrollment has dropped a little bit during the pandemic, we feel like we're going to be able to do this for a while. So currently we're paying through June 2021, and then towards the end of June we'll reevaluate for the next quarter. But that's another way that we're using our typical annual funds to support centers right now. Another way we're using our typical annual funds, we're using quality dollars from the annual funding to set up a family child care network. Now this is really exciting, and we're one of the first few states that has launched this. Others are asking questions so that they can do it as well, but we are partnering with Western Kentucky University, their TNTA center, to set up a family child care network in 8 DCC regions throughout the state. And a training agency, a subcontractor, will be selected in 7 of the regions, and then Western Kentucky University will be the contact in their region. And they will be basically the point people in that area to support our family child care homes. If you flip to the next slide, you can kind of see what we're asking of them. Supporting them with business needs like tuition billing, compliance with the federal food program, tax preparation, a lot of the business skills that many of us who have background in child development might not necessarily know or be as comfortable with. We're also asking them to support family child care homes with training and technical assistance, best practice. Many trainings throughout the state are focused on center-based care and not on home-based care. And we want to make sure that these providers are getting the training that they need. The network will recruit new family child care homes, and they'll also work with businesses to help connect them to family child care homes when their employees need care, and look at a kind of a symbiotic relationship between businesses and family child care homes. If the business isn't big enough to have on-site child care, maybe they want to work with a family child care home in order to connect their employees. And this helps the business because they know their employees have consistent child care. It helps the family child care homes because it increases their enrollment. So this is kicking off very soon. We're finalizing contracts, and Western is reaching out to potential candidates for subcontractors, and then this should be up and running to support our family child care homes very soon. If you want to switch again. Now, after we thought the CARES Act was a one-time thing, and after we thought that the CRISA Act would be a one-time thing, in March, the federal government approved another round of federal funding, and this time it is the largest we have ever seen. It is so substantial. Kentucky is going to be receiving over $763 million specifically designated for child care. Now, this time there's a lot more restrictions. As each plan has come out restrictions have increased and accountability has increased, which of course with that much money, you want accountability in place. This time it's coming from two different buckets of money. The first bucket is in stabilization grants, and that's the largest bucket, about close to 2/3 of the money, $470 million. And that goes directly to centers who need support. And then the other bucket is going to come through our typical child care and development block grant funding, but it's going to have more flexibility than we typically have with child care and development block grant funds. So if you want to flip to the next slide, the stabilization grants. So this part we know. There's a lot of information that the state administrators, which is the person in each state that has my position, we're waiting on a lot of clarifications. We've submitted a huge list of questions to the Federal Office of Child Care so we can finalize plans. But the stabilization grants we know because it was included in the American Rescue Plan bill. So this is going to be how centers are able to utilize this money when it's given out. Personnel costs. And this is a big one. We really want to focus on salaries, benefits, premium pay, salary increases, even bonuses for recruitment or retention. Anything we can do to keep people in their jobs and attract new people to their jobs in childcare, because staffing is the greatest barrier that we have right now. Then facility costs, fixed expenses, things that you've got to pay every month and that never go away. Cleaning supplies, PPE, training on health and safety. Again, everything in this money has to be related to COVID-19 and the pandemic in some way, shape, or form, the public health emergency. But it also can benefit the whole of the center as well. Purchases, updated equipment, supplies, responding to the public health emergency. Goods and services needed to resume child care, mental health supports. This is the first time that the money that's gone out to the centers has allowed for mental health support. So this could be mental health curriculum in the center. We have great programs like conscious discipline, second steps, things that can be utilized in the centers to support them. And then also the grants can cover new, existing, or ongoing costs of reimbursement since the beginning of the pandemic. So say that there were really big expenses maybe a center put in a new ventilation system earlier, before March 21st when this bill passed. This money can still go back to pay for that. If a center had to take out a small business loan during the pandemic to keep its doors open, and we can prove that it happened during the course of the pandemic, then this money can help with those payments. So these are all the federal guidelines on how the money can be spent. And so Kentucky will mirror these guidelines when the stabilization grants are passed out. Because this is a large amount of money, it will be multiple payments. The grant shows that it has to be allocated by a certain time and then spent in a certain time. But basically we have almost over the next 3 years that this money will be distributed. If you want to go to the next slide. So what we do know for sure, hard deadlines. The center had to be open. The center or the family child care home had to be open by March 21st when the bill was passed. They cannot open just to get this funding. And so since that's in the federal bill, DCC will not be able to be flexible on that date. There's going to be rolling application dates. So there can't be just a one-time cutoff that if you don't apply by this date, you can't get the funding. But again, the center still has to be open before March 21st, but they won't have an issue of missing a cutoff to get the money. And this is going to allow for administrative fees. Up until this point, we have done everything possible to have every cent go to centers, but this is going to be a really large job to administer all of this funding and the projects associated with it. So we are going to have some of this money go towards administrative fees because my staff so far has done all this, and it has been a large task. My All-Stars program team has done the vast majority of this because we haven't had All-Stars visits. And I'm so thankful for their hard work. If you have called and asked for questions about any of the grants, you've talked to Shade and his amazing team, and they've been very helpful. And my PD team has helped set up grants for first aid and CPR and things like that. But all of us are starting to sink a little bit, and we need some help. So we are going to be adding some administrative help with these grants to make sure that everybody gets them in a timely fashion. The next slide here, this is what we know about the CCDBG dollars. It will not be just for subsidy, which is what typical CCDBG focuses on. Normally, we have to spend at least 70% of our CCDBG money on direct services. That's usually subsidy, and then we spend around 14 to 15% on quality. We know that this money is supposed to be utilized for all programs. So centers that have very few subsidy kiddos will still get the benefit of this, just like we have in the previous 2 rounds. We know that this money may have some capital that could help for startup of new programs, which the stabilization grants can't. And this could help with relief and rebuilding. You know, that's the main focus. And once we get all of our questions answered at the federal level on what the states can do, then we will start putting together those plans. We've had multiple agencies reach out to us and give what they feel like is the most important suggestions. And we appreciate that content. You know, for us, still top priorities, obviously the stabilization grant piece is covered, and I'm very grateful for that. We're still looking at top priorities, including subsidy for families, and that way the subsidy money goes into the centers. Supporting families with disabilities. The kids that have disabilities in the centers, do they have access to the care that they need during this time period, as well as kids with special needs that might be mental health needs. We're also looking at gaps in data that we have at the state. A lot of that data is going to help us moving forward find the best way to serve all the kids in Kentucky. And so we are looking at some computer system updates, but that will be minor, a minor amount of these funds utilized towards that. So if you want to move to the last slide here, you know, that's kind of what's going on in childcare right now. We have a lot of regs that have been open and reviewed during this time period that actually had nothing to do with the pandemic. We've gone through professional development regulations and health and safety regs that were updated because of Senate bill that passed in the last year's session on improved eating habits and exercise and things like that for kiddos. So a lot of those regulations are moving around. But I would say the primary focus at our office for a while now has been utilizing these funds to make sure that as few programs close as possible. And NAUIC estimated at the beginning of the pandemic, based on centers giving them information, that up to 40% of our child care programs could close during the pandemic. Kentucky has still lost less than 10%, which I'm so grateful for. Now, with that being said, 10% is a lot, and we don't want to lose any more. So we're trying to utilize these funds to get them out to the centers and to do what we can to help preserve them in a timely fashion.
Well, you've been busy, Sarah, clearly. Thank you for that. Really detailed, but I know you could probably share a full few hours about all the things going on. So that was really helpful. And we will, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I know if Sarah can't get them to them today, we will commit to helping answer your questions and send them in a follow-up email. But I guess the major question I have for you after hearing all this is, you have advocates here, a forum of, you know, people who know childcare well, but also know from cross-sector. What help do you need from us in the as moving forward? What kind of call to action would you like to put forward to us?
You know, a lot of it is just getting correct information out there. Because things have changed so quickly during the pandemic. I mean, you know, by the time we've updated emergency regulation, new changes have happened, or by the time we get one round of funding out, there's another round of funding. And so a lot of times communication, like we're getting communication out, but providers don't understand it until the next change is made. So, you know, a big piece of it is just helping to get correct communication out to the centers and providers and helping them know about available resources. Once the free first aid and CPR training starts, letting all the centers know where they are and how to find them. Those types of things are going to be really essential. As we start with this next round of funding, because it's larger, there's probably going to be more projects. And so, you know, a lot of it is going to be communication to the centers, helping them know what they are eligible for and how they can access that. And you know, from an advocate perspective, this money is amazing, and it is for 3 years. And we know that it's for 3 years. So we've already gotten our award letter. What happens after that? And I'll say many of us as state administrators have already started addressing that to Congress. I was on a congressional press briefing about 3 to 4 weeks ago through the first 5-year fund, saying, thank you so much. The state administrators value this so much. You're doing amazing things. We're going to make all the changes we can, but in 3 years, will it be there? You know, and we're already starting to see things move. I mean, the Congress is already talking about what could happen after this, so that's amazing. But our advocates need to keep pushing that in 3 years, these infrastructure changes can stay in place. And that's a big deal because, you know, typically in my role as a state administrator, advocacy is not one of the big things that I can do. I can do it to some extent, but not in the way that you all can. So continuing to share that information on our end, we're going to collect all the data we can during these 3 years to show how this money benefits childcare. And we can get that data out to you all, and you can use that as your number one weapon when it comes to advocacy. But that's going to be a key piece of moving forward, is continuing to let the federal government know, to let businesses know how much we need their support and their financial interest to make childcare more structurally sound, because we know that the infrastructure is so critical right now, and we're not very stable. And the biggest point to that is that staff make way too little and parents have to pay way too much. And so we need assistance to offset those two things so that our staff can get what they need and parents are not crushed by the cost of childcare, whether they are on subsidy or whether they're just like me in a middle-class family that's having to pay that cost for 2 kiddos.
Right. Well said. And I think the point you made about making sure, I think it's on us to make sure that our leaders in Washington, D.C. are knowledgeable and aware of the impact, not only the need that is facing childcare, but how it's helping. So I think we are here to stand by you in terms of, you know, that data that you collect on the impacts and the stories. We will be right alongside you to share that and make sure they are hearing what the difference it's making, and that it's important to continue investing in childcare because we've failed to do so for such a long time. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sarah. We really appreciate it. And I think now I'm going to turn it over to Terry. You wanted to kick us off for our next segment.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to pivot from Sarah's in-depth sort of analysis to a more political perspective. I do want to just say 2 things. First of all, there is a hot new book out. I don't know if you can see this. It's called America's Childcare Crisis. It is the gold standard, and it's written by Dr. Vanover. I will tell you, I think the most powerful chapter that I've read about childcare in a long time, and many of you on this call have a much better understanding than I do, but chapter 3 talks about professional perception, which is really the sociology of what the childcare industry faces: lack of respect, lack of parity with K-12, sort of an inequitable perspective. And I will just tell you that I think that chapter, Sarah, frames so much of the issues at hand. Secondly, I just need to say, Sarah will not say this, but folks who I respect in Frankfurt will tell you this. Sarah has gotten the heck beaten out of her because no matter what she decides is wrong. I just need to say very publicly that I don't think there is a more reasoned and thoughtful leader up there. I think she's been given very, very difficult dilemmas. And Sarah, I appreciate your intellect and your guts over this past time. And I think all of us feel that way. So childcare advocates, but mostly kids, are very lucky to have you. So I just need to say that. So as we're shifting from the Sarah Vanover show, we're moving to the Josie Raymond, Julie Rocky Adams show. And welcome, Senator Rocky Adams. So it looks as if you are either in an airplane or a car. So I don't know if you're driving or flying, but regardless. So, when we at KYA think of go-to leaders for kids, sometimes we have to draw 7 or 8 names out of a hat until we get Josie or Julie. So today we put all the names of all legislators in the hat, and it only took 12 times to get Josie and Julie to be magically drawn, because what we appreciate about both of them is in an area like early childhood, they absolutely are powerful voices, but they also understand that you can't separate early childhood from economic well-being or K-12 or juvenile justice even. And so they're really integrated thinkers about kids. I want to ask you an opening question, and then I'm going to be quiet and let Mehek take it. But one of the most disturbing articles that I have read in a long time recently came from the New Yorker. It's called Joe Biden, Republicans, and Kids Stuff. It's written by Amy Davidson Sorkin, and it is not a neutral article. Okay, I just need to say that. It is a democratically oriented partisan article. But despite that theme, here's what I took away: that wars around kids are going to grow more intense in Washington. That as negotiations go on all kinds of issues, suddenly, instead of being common ground, kids' issues, and she actually lifted universal pre-K as the primary divisive issue right now in Frankfurt. We've been lucky, I think, in Frankfurt, and I think your colleagues in both the House and Senate, Democrat, Republican, urban, and rural, have not gotten the credit they deserve, because kids have been common issues. I worry a lot about the trickle-down effect, that if that friction around kids is in DC, I want to know your perception. How worried should we be? And how do we make sure that kids continue as a common ground? Mehek, after our 2 guests answer that, then you take it. But that's sort of a macro question. So Josie, Julie, either one of you jump in, and then the other one chime in.
Okay, I'm not on mute. I was just making sure. I'll be happy to. And you could go, Terry, I think, first of all, thank you for letting me participate. I am in the car. I'm not driving. I'm in a parking lot on the side of the road before my next meeting. But, you could take that question in a lot of different ways. There's so many different directions. I think before I kind of address that, I think the thing that we need to wrap our heads around in government, that we do a terrible job in, is understanding that the dollars you spend early save you so many more dollars on the back end. It's like we can't figure out how to do the front end piece really well. And so I think there's a messaging on this, which is we have to spend these dollars early. I know Josie's always been really interested in universal pre-K, because those dollars are well spent on the front end. And so if we're ever going to have a fighting chance for our kids in this dynamic world that we live in, that is, I think, so much more complicated than the world I grew up in, we have to think about that initial investment as just a given. And that's what we need to fight for all the time.
Yeah. Josie?
Yeah, I'm thinking of, I haven't read the New Yorker piece yet, but I feel like, Terry, they talk about Idaho, the state legislature in Idaho, which recently voted to reject some federal childcare grant funding that they had previously approved. And it became this culture issue and this partisan battle about mothers being at home, right? Whereas it hadn't been before. And I don't think we're going to go down that road in Kentucky. There's no opponents in Frankfurt to early childhood education. There's nobody who's anti. We argue over all kinds of science in Frankfurt. We don't argue over this brain science. It's just everyone's 10th priority. So we never get to it. So I think it's like Julie said, we just keep elevating it. And that's what we're doing right now. When we hear from constituents, we hear from very few people who say, I'm a childcare voter.
Right.
It's this huge component of people's lives, but often it's a 5 or 10 year chunk that they're living it, right? And those are some of the most stressful and busy years of their lives. And then there's so many other competing issues that sometimes feel more urgent because there's sort of an acute crisis. But I think we're lucky in Frankfurt that we've got this foundation on both sides of the aisle of understanding. We just haven't hit that urgency piece yet. And Sarah, now might be the time, right? With some of the data that you've presented to us, the loss of centers and other things. And so hopefully we can move it up the list from 10th priority to, third, second, first.
I think that's a perfect opportunity for us to kind of go on to this next question that we had. And it's really continues off of making sure this is a priority at the federal level. And based off of Dr. Vanover's presentation, we've seen a lot of action happening just coming down from the feds, really. And we know there's a lot of activity that's going to continue happening throughout this year. So what are some hopeful steps that we have seen in policy to combat childcare deserts and to support the childcare landscape?
Do you want me to go first, or I guess it doesn't matter?
It doesn't matter.
Okay, well, it was, and one of the frustrating things is, clearly no one wanted to legislate or appropriate during a pandemic because you just don't know, there's just no rule book on it. So, you have a lot of, what is that, armchair quarterbacking, where everyone's like, oh, I would have done this, I would have done that. But across the state of Kentucky, particularly when it comes to childcare, it is not only a childcare issue, but it's an economic, it's a workforce issue. And when you have a workforce shut down, and you have schools shut down, it just becomes that much more complicated. So I think now everyone's getting a shot in the arm. We have to open things back up. We have to have the funding necessary. We've got to get parents back to work. And in order to do that, we have to have, make sure that our child care centers are safe and well-funded. So it's kind of a holistic thing, but I will tell you, I think that one of the frustrating things I've seen during the pandemic is the isolation of our kids and the fact that they can't go somewhere, or they're stuck at home, or they're not in school. And, if I heard, well, kids are resilient, one more time, I was going to scream, because I'll tell you, I'm a parent and my kids struggled, and my kids are older and they had more sophisticated coping skills than some of these youngsters do. And so, yeah, our kids might be resilient, but we have to be steadfast and make sure that we, as legislators, as adults, as child care providers, as child care advocates, that we advocate for those resources to be open and available to our kids. I'm really, really steadfast in that belief that we have to fund it, and we have to open them, and we have to even expand those services. So that's my spiel.
I'd say that, armchair quarterbacking, right? Or struggling through these regulations, or living through restrictions. Like I always tell the story about my 1-year-old who was trapped in the infant room due to COVID regulations, right? This did awaken some of our colleagues in the way that in committees all last year, you would see people that had never before been concerned with early childhood talking about, developmental delays. And I was like, that's wonderful. I hope you're not just going after the governor. I hope you'll keep that fire and passion into next session. And so hopefully those people remain partners with
engaged.
us.
Yeah.
In this work. Yeah. A couple of good things that came out of Frankfurt last year, bipartisan things that I think you're going to see trickle out in terms of families supporting young children. We made the telehealth regulations during COVID permanent. So you can always see your doctor online now, and we know that's going to help families and children. We removed Medicaid copays, which was like the quietest, most impactful thing we did, I think. And I think that's really going to help families to be healthier. As Sarah mentioned, we relaxed some zoning rules on family childcare homes. So I'm eager to see the impact of that. And many of you all know better than I do how soon we might see that impact and how big that impact might be in terms of getting some of these family childcare homes established or reestablished in areas that need them. And then Julie was able to increase the reimbursement rate for centers. And I am eager to see the impact of that as well. But again, don't know how soon and don't know what we'll be able to see from that and take to our colleagues and say, look what we were able to do with $2 a day. Imagine, $10 more. I do want to say that
they need $10 more. I mean, you and I both agree on that, Josie. I mean, I can't believe they've done as well as they have without it.
And I don't even want to know what you had to do to get $2. But I hope that that's enough that we see the impact. I know centers will feel it, but that we can take something tangible back to our colleagues and say, here's this investment we made that you probably don't remember or don't even know about, and look at what we're starting to do. I think going into next year, I always want to call out the 100,000 plus Kentucky moms who have left the workforce due to COVID to care for their children, and who knows how many other fathers and other caretakers. And economic recovery is going better than we expected, but we don't know yet how it's going for moms in particular, because our kids are still not back in school, and they may need some on-ramps. So this is what I'm thinking about going into next year.
That's helpful to hear, Representative Raymond. And I do want to kind of take a step back and really talk about that CCAP reimbursement increase for a second, because I feel like that kind of went through last minute, but we obviously, all of us that are on the call and advocates across the state are very excited about that piece. So Senator Rocky Adams, can you just talk to us, like, what was the method to the madness to make sure that we got that passed through?
The method is that I kept bringing it up, and I wouldn't let it go. And, I think that there's always discussion around dollars when they are reoccurring dollars. But, Josie's expressed this several times. Our kids have been through a lot, and, she hopes that there are members that keep that passion. I do too. I mean, I 100% agree with that sentiment. I hope that people keep that passion, but at the same time, we had to do something. It was time. It was past time. And so I was just kind of a dog on a bone. And I just kept asking and asking and asking. And you know what? And here's the truth. We just said it before. It's not done yet. We have to be as dogged as we were this last session to try to continue that, because our kids don't deserve anything less. I mean, we owe it to them.
And we appreciate that passion, and you consistently bringing it up, because we know that's going to be huge dividends to a lot of providers, especially during this struggling time. And I kind of wanted to talk about the FullDay Kindergarten investment. That was, again, another huge piece and a huge allocation that we saw this past year. And we know that's a one-time investment, or at least like that allocation right now is. And so can you really talk to us, either one of you all, or both chime in, please? How are you already looking forward or towards what that looks like next year? Or are there other policies that you're hoping for to really bolster that piece, that FullDay Kindergarten piece?
I'll say over in the House, we were on pins and needles about whether that was going to come through. It was a promise made, and sometimes promises are kept and sometimes they're not. It's a promise made in the House when we were debating another education bill, and they said they'll do it in the Senate. House members don't like to rely on that, but it did. It came back from the Senate, and that felt like an enormous win for people in both parties who've been working on that for years. I've not heard yet from my district, well, Julie's too, JCPS, how that'll be allocated. I know in the past when legislators were advocating to fund FullDay Kindergarten, and this would be permanently, that they would ask districts to take back that money that they had been spending on that that half day of kindergarten, which in JCPS was over $100 million, I think, and commit to putting, 50% to early childhood, 25% to this, 25% to this. And I've not heard from JCPS how that's going to be allocated. I think JCPS is like the district office, they're working very hard, but I know that they're underwater. As a mom, I'm waiting to hear what the summer plan is, with spending from the rescue plan. So I think that it's going to be a little bit till we hear what they're going to do with the savings. It's essentially savings now that the state's funding kindergarten. I know it'll be put to good use. I hope that good use is early childhood.
Yeah. And I think that, it's really interesting because we do things like this, and I'm for it, Josie's for it, but each district is very different in kind of their thoughts on it. Some districts were very excited. Other districts were like, we don't need it. So it's kind of a wait and see approach, how each district in particular approaches this, and the feedback that we get. I would like to see, again, we have a lot of discussion around reoccurring dollars rather than one-time dollars. I would like to move this into the reoccurring category, because I think any investment you make in the early stages pays dividends on the back end. And I firmly believe that that return on investment is there. So I'm anxious. I hope that we have some really good results from this and some really good stories that we can continue to use to grow this.
Yeah. Mahek, I'm going to interrupt because I'm going to say something here. Just to amplify what Representative Raymond and Senator Rocky Adams said, I worry a lot that many folks, very well-meaning folks, didn't hear what Julie said. It was a one-time shot. I can tell you that I've been in 3 meetings in the last 2 weeks, and it included, I guess, over 70 superintendents, those 3 together. The prevailing sentiment is don't assume that we're going to get it again. So hold back on big, bold investments. So, I want to emphasize what Josie and Julie said, which is if y'all see full-day kindergarten as important for those kids, but also as sort of seed capital for early childhood, you better start talking to your senator and representative now, because if we wake up and see a 2-year budget without full-day kindergarten, that one-off allocation may do more harm than good. So I just want to kind of reiterate that. I'll be quiet, Mahek, but you knew I had to weigh in because that's one of my growing concerns as we go toward 2022.
Mm-hmm, certainly. And that's a good call to action for those joining us here today as a follow-up step as we move forward. So thank you, Terry. So just moving on, I just wanted to ask one last question in regards to childcare and early childhood learning. If you all had a magic wand, what are you hoping to do in the next couple of years?
A magic wand. I would make myself first look 25 years younger with the magic wands, and I'm just joking. But I think that I think that one of the short-term answers to that is these ARPA dollars, these federal dollars that are coming down. How we spend them is critically important, and from everything I understand with the federal guidelines that we know right now, that they are, that there is a lot of latitude with how we do this. And so we actually have a call with the governor's office on Friday to talk about these ARPA dollars. And I've been very encouraged from this administration that they are trying to think very broadly and openly about this investment. And so I'm very encouraged in the short term on this. In the long term, I'm consistently frustrated by the fact that, Kentucky 3 years in a row now has been #1 in child abuse and neglect rankings. And so it's really important that we don't continue to accept that ranking we start to, I think, focus really specifically on prevention from childcare, prevention in our schools, prevention in our homes, prevention in our foster, our fictive kin. I mean, you name it. We have to have that conversation, and we have to have the dollars around that, because not only is it good, I think, good public policy, it makes good fiscal sense down the road. And I, for one, am planning on this next session having some bold ideas relative to those rankings for child abuse and neglect, because I'm tired of being number one. It's those days are, I want to see in our rearview mirror.
I'm sure we'll be connecting with you soon. Probably right after this call. Representative Raymond?
Yeah, so my magic wand, well, I'm annoying, right? So any issue that comes up in Frankfurt or in my personal life, like the prison population, women in the workforce, child abuse, I go, you know what would really help with that? Pre-K, right? And now it's like a joke and it's a refrain, but it's true. Every single time it's true. So I'd wave my wand and we'd have pre-K for all who want it, but it'd be pre-K that really works for families. Mike, it's gonna be mixed delivery, you know it, but it would include transportation, it would be full day, it would be full year, right? It serves the students and it serves the family as it serves the community, the economy, the Commonwealth. I would also, with my magic wand, have Joe Manchin vote for the American Family Plan. Joe Biden's sweeping proposal to support families in America. There's a poll out this morning, which almost exactly mirrors the Pritchard Committee's poll from 2019 that says 63% of voters support free preschool for all 3 and 4-year-olds. So if anybody knows Joe Manchin, if you could get that information to him, that'd be great. And then the last thing that I'll say, I do want to mention that we have a mayor's race in Louisville next year. And this is something I'm paying really close attention to. We've had our mayor for 12 years. We could be electing someone for the next 12. And so I think this is our best opportunity in the last 12 years and the next 12 to educate some of our local leaders about the importance of early childhood education. So with my magic wand, everyone who runs for mayor in the city of Louisville will get it.
Well, I like that 3-prong approach at the state, local, and federal level, so I appreciate that. Well, thank you both for being just 2 powerhouse legislative leaders that we have across the state, and we just, again, thank you for your time and access. And now I'm going to turn it over to Courtney Downs.
All right, thank you. So let me start by thanking Aetna Better Health for their support of today's Advocate Virtual Forum. And a huge thank you to Dr. Sarah Vanover, to Senator Julie Radke Adams, and to Representative Josie Raymond for joining us today, for your expertise and your continued advocacy, your passion and leadership in the face of some really unprecedented challenges. I think a critical takeaway for all of us, regardless of the sectors that we work in, is how important it is to start thinking now about what the childcare landscape can or should look like beyond this federal funding cycle. So there's a much broader understanding of how important it is now. So we have to keep building on that momentum. So whether that's advocating on the federal level, statewide level, and then even with local businesses so that they know how critical these investments, especially these front-end investments in childcare and early childhood are to Kentucky families and the communities as well. So thank you all again for joining us and for all that you do. So looking ahead to some upcoming forums, some of you may know that May is National Foster Care Month. So next week we will be discussing young people who have aged out of foster care. And then on the 19th, we will be talking about parenting and working with kids who have experienced trauma. So as always, we will send a follow-up email that will include a recording of today's forum, along with any of the resources that were discussed. And then we'll also have links to sign up for the next 2 forums. So thank you all for joining us again this week and have a great rest of your day.